event. I know that it's been really successful the last 2 times that it was run, and the students really enjoyed it. So please take notes. If you've got any questions, now's the time to ask them. The great thing about today is you can open a textbook and you can learn as much as you want theory-wise, and you can answer as many questions as you want for your tutors. However, when you get into industry, sometimes it is very different. So we're very lucky today to have 2 industry people here for you to poke and get as much information out of as you can, because eventually I know all of you want to go into industry and get them jobs. In every single job that you get at some stage or another, if you're not organising a conference, you're going to be organising some sort of meeting that is of quite a large scale. So this today is going to be extremely relevant to any role that you get in events. Okay? Ask as many questions as you can. If you've anything that you wanted to ask Marlies that you haven't done beforehand, today is the time to do it as well. Take advantage of the opportunity. That's the main thing I wanted you to get from today. Enjoy yourselves. If no one is here in the next hour and you're having a little break, feel free to get on that phone and get other people in, because they need to be here as well. Even business students, not just event students, this will be really helpful for them as well. So thanks a million to Tracy and Susan for coming along today. I know they've taken a lot of time out to be here, so I know you'll make them feel very welcome. Alright, so thanks a million, Marlies, for organising today. Thanks to Aaron as well, who I know helped set everything up for today last night. They worked hard, and Katrina.
Pauline.
So yeah, Pauline as well, who's out the front. Have a great day, enjoy, and I'll catch up with you all during the day. Alrighty. Didn't know that was recording.
Right.
Okay, Tracy is our first speaker. So Tracy Lowe. Tracy is one of our wonderful talent from Avoca Moray field and has quite a considerable history in events herself. I believe particularly good at sponsorship.
Yeah, well, I achieved results.
Achieved results. So she is going to share those results with you today.
Okay, do I have a pointer, a clicker thing, or do I just...
I can arrange one.
Can you? It's a bit easier rather than moving in front of the screen every 5 minutes. Hi to all of you. I've seen some of you before and met you before. Do I have to stand in the middle, do I?
I'm just aiming the camera for wherever you're going to be.
Yeah, I sort of want that visual.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a bit nervous today, sorry. Having to do this in front of and
Just us.
people. So we're doing these inside events, and my background is conferencing. Only for the past 4 years, which isn't a long time. Prior to that, I've done a lot of work in customer service, working over the phone. I've done face-to-face business sales. I was a wedding photographer for 12 years, and I used to do a lot of volunteer work when I was raising my children, and through my volunteer work I was involved in organising a lot of just small-time events, weekend retreats. I was sort of a co-manager for a women's group, and so I got involved in a little bit of organising events through that, just through volunteer services. Which one do I use? Okay. So then about nearly 4.5 years ago, I was really fortunate to go for a position that was an events coordinator, and I was a communications officer as well. So I did all the marketing and I managed all the events for this particular company. Through my 4 years, and from then I progressed to working for myself for about 12 months. That didn't go as successfully as I would have liked, and then I moved from Victoria up to Queensland, taking on an events management role up here. So we'll go into what those roles were a little bit afterwards. So through the course of that 4 years, I did 6 major conferences and seminars, but I also assisted with managing board meetings, workplace meetings. The organisation that I worked for, they used to run work group meetings for operations managers, chief finance officers, and they'd have board meetings every month to 2 months. So I was involved in organising the venues for those, and often I was secretariat, so I'd have to go to the meetings, which usually went for 2 whole days, and you'd just be sitting there at the computer just listening to everything they said, and I had to learn pretty quick what it was they were talking about, because at the start I knew nothing. So you learn as you go. in this industry. And we also, and my last job was for a health association, so we used to do CPD, continuing professional development workshops for doctors. So this was the first company that I worked for, which was Power Housing Australia. So we were an association, a not-for-profit association. We were a peak body who represented community housing organisations across Australia. You may have heard of Compass Housing or Brisbane Housing in this region, and basically they provide support to people on lower incomes, providing housing for them. But they look at new ways of doing it as opposed to the original public housing system where they would develop a whole suburb and everybody was sort of banged into the same suburb on similar socio-demographics. Now what they're doing is looking at new ways, and it's what they call mixed tenure. So you may have heard of NRAS and things like that. So they build large developments and they sell a lot of the apartments off, but they also put people that need affordable housing into a percentage of it. And we were connected to the International Housing Partnership, which was a similar thing, but that was an international partnership that was focusing on what we could do around the world. And that was mainly Canada, UK, Australia and the US. So we also managed international events for them. Then I managed some seminars for HIT System, which were training seminars focused on triathletes, marathon runners and that type of thing. My client was a chiropractor and he'd written a particular book that proposed or presented a safe way for people to train and achieve really, really strong results to Olympic standards and that type of thing. So I managed seminars for them. And then when I moved to Queensland, I worked for Health Workforce Queensland. They're a government sort of agency, again a not-for-profit organisation, and they look after rural and remote doctors across Queensland. And as a part of working for them, I also did these training workshops for doctors, which we would do anywhere from the Gold Coast, Brisbane, Sunshine Coast, up to Mackay, Cairns, those sorts of places, to provide support for rural and remote doctors so that they could stay up to date with their knowledge and learning. And we managed the Rural Doctors Association of Queensland's annual conference, which I did in Cairns last year. Most of the conferences I did were for about 250 people and had sponsorships involved. So where to begin? So what I want to go through today is I started putting this presentation together based on your events textbook that you've got and what I'm teaching at Evoca. And it was doing my head in because it was just so textbook and I just thought, I can't stand this. And then when I spoke to Mullish, she said, no, just do it from your own perspective. So I may have some of the time sort of factors out, but I'm just really working through this based on what my understanding is of how we would work towards a conference and what were the steps that we'd put in place. So the first thing you need to know if you're going to be doing a conference is who are you working for? You need to know your business. You need to know the industry, the sector, what it is that company is all about. Now I worked as an in-house conference manager, which meant I was employed by the companies. But Susan is different. She has her own management company, so she is then employed by people externally to come on board and work for them. So same. You still have to have an understanding of who it is that you're working for, because you can put your best foot forward and present to them or provide to them the best service if you know what it's all about. And it's really important to just connect with the key people and that sort of thing. What is the industry or sector? So, as I said, in my case, Power Housing Australia was affordable housing. Health Workforce Queensland was in the medical sort of sector, and HIT System was in the sporting sort of side of things, as well as health. So you need to know your organisation and what they're all about. So again, that's just showing you that we were providing housing. These companies are all about what they call growth development. So to be a member of those organisations, you had to be an organisation that was building and developing a lot of new properties. Otherwise, you could not be a part of that association. That's why they were a peak body who could represent the associations to government and key sort of dignitaries and things like that. So what is the purpose of your event? Establish the reason. What is the event trying to achieve? So every year when you do an annual conference for the same organisation, they have a different focus. They have a different key topic that they want to focus on, which can be based on what's going on in the economy and changes in government and lots of different things. But every year there's a different focus, even though it might be the same organisation. So for that particular conference, you've got to come up with a title. Now this may not be your role, but you may play an important part in it. I was lucky with Powerhouse in Australia that we were a really small group of people that worked together, and my CEO, who I actually caught up with in Brisbane last night because he's here on a visit, he was really into us all being hands-on and involved. So I was lucky that I got to play a key part in that. And when we were throwing around names and titles, we'd scribble things on the whiteboard, and it was good because I got to be involved in that. With my last role for Health Workforce Queensland, it was a much bigger organisation. I didn't have any say in any of that. It was just like, well, this is the name of the conference, this is what your roles are, go and do it. So it depends who you're working for, what might be allocated and expected of you. But you do have to come up with a title that reflects what the conference is going to be delivering to the delegates that attend. Who do you want to attend? So you need to know who are your target audience. Where are you going to get delegates to come from? It's a lot harder than it appears, and even when you know you've got a captive audience there in staff members that work for the organisations, doesn't mean that they're just all going to turn up, because there's money to be spent. Either their company will pay for them to come or they have to pay themselves. So you've got to do a lot of strategic marketing to get bums on seats. You need to identify who could be your key speakers, or who are the types of speakers that you would want involved. Sometimes they can come from within the organisation, but you don't want all of your speakers to come from within the organisation because everyone will get bored with them. So the delegates want interest. They want somebody new. They want someone who's going to challenge their thought processes. Keynote speakers, it's really important to get the best keynote that you can, because the keynote is like the identifying personality, if you like, that you can promote. It's a draw card for people to come to your event. For the seminars that I was doing, we had Steve Moneghetti. Now, does anyone know who Steve Moneghetti is?
Yes, he's a marathon runner.
Yeah, so he's a marathon runner. He's very well respected. He was actually, what's the title? The last Commonwealth Games, I can't remember what he was called, but he had some role that he wasn't paid, it was a volunteer role that he did, but he was invited. And he was sort of like a support person for all the Commonwealth Games representatives from Australia. And so he was just there to... Sorry?
He used to work at the Australian Institute of Sport.
Yeah, he did work for the Australian Institute of Sport. But look, he represents sport in Australia very positively, and he's won Commonwealth Games and got silver and bronze medals and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we had him as our keynote speaker, and that was our draw card, because he was fantastic and people just wanted to come and be a captive audience with him presenting. You need to identify government officials, politicians that might be influential in your area, and that's a really tricky one, because you can have a politician lined up to turn up, and then suddenly there's an election announced and that politician's gone and everything changes, and so we've come across that where there's been some really last minute sort of peddling to try and get somebody to replace who we thought was the Minister of Housing, and now who is the Minister of Housing, and how do we contact that person? So one minute you're dealing with maybe the Liberals, next minute you're dealing with the Labor Party, and it's like, yeah, you've got to try and establish all your contacts all over again.
So how do you
The
do
Liberals aren't giving you the phone number of the Labor person. So yeah, there's a lot of things that are really tricky in all of this. How do you do that?
that? Yeah,
Lots of phone calls.
lots of phone calls.
Just lots and lots of persistent phone calls. We know who the minister is, how do we get in touch with him? And there's a lot of roadblocks and, you know, no, he's not available and this and that, so, or she. So yeah, that's a really tricky one, is to line up your speakers. So yeah, these are just some images from the website where I was working. So Power Housing was, it still does exist, to increase the supply of affordable housing through a sharing of knowledge, skills and experience, partnering together to create a sustainable housing future, people, places and providers. And that title came out of one of our conferences that we did. I've got some conference brochures and sponsorship brochures there just to show you a little bit of marketing collateral if you want to have a look. And creating socially, economically and environmentally sustainable places for people to live. So these were the banners that we had on our website that were in rotation, which reflected what our message was all about for the conference. So everything sort of interconnects. Finances. Who loves doing the finance unit in events? I hate it. It does my head in. I really don't like it. And yeah, I get frustrated because money and numbers and things are just not my area of expertise. But we have to learn it, and you do have to stick to budgets. So what do we need to achieve from this? What will the budget be? So right from the outset, when you begin the planning for your conference, you must have a budget in place. And the budget needs to be broken down. It's not just, oh, we're going to spend $200,000 on this event. It's like, what does that $200,000 go to? What will it be allocated to? So you've got portions that will be allocated to the actual venue, for all of their catering, for room hire, all of that type of thing. You've got accommodation that may need to be booked for and paid for. Lights? Oh, flights, yes. Yep. So there'll be travel expenses. Now you won't have to pay for everybody that's attending, but you will be paying for the staff that are involved. You'll be paying for your keynote speakers. You'll be paying for maybe some other presenters or dignitaries that you want there. So there's a lot of expense in travel and accommodation. Catering is massive. It's probably one of the biggest things. Audio-visual, your AV, staging, lighting, theming for functions, all of that. So it's all got to be broken down, and every part on the budget has to be adhered to. So if you're the conference manager, you're managing what is being spent and how it's all, how you stick to that. So you've got to do a lot of negotiating with all of your suppliers to ensure that your audio-visual, if you've got a budget of, say, $50,000 for your audio-visual, you don't go over $50,000. So there's a lot of negotiating that you've got to do with the AV companies, because you know what equipment you need to make it run, and there might be a lot of, oh, okay, maybe we could do without that, but we really need that. So you have to know what all the important features or products or services are that you need. Will you require sponsorships to support the budget? So this is what a lot of not-for-profits do. They have sponsors on board, and again, it's a difficult thing to get sponsors to come on board and pay thousands of dollars to have their company branded and promoted at the event. Some sponsors will be your regulars, and you know that every year they'll just sign up and they'll be there. So you really look after them. You give them prominent locations in the trade exhibits, you give them prominent branding on the websites and all of that. But you need to know what your break-even points will be. Do you want sponsorship just to cover for the whole cost of the event, or do you want sponsorship to provide ongoing income so that your organisation can work. Because if you're a not-for-profit, you're operating on sponsorships and on membership registrations. You might get a bit of government support to operate, but not necessarily. What will you charge your delegates? You don't want to overcharge, but you don't want to undercharge either. So you want the rate to be substantial enough that you make a little bit of excess out of it, but you don't want to overtax potential delegates, because a lot of them are just going to go, look, it's just too hard, it's too expensive, I can't afford it this year. So you need to calculate that as well. Generally speaking, I sort of feel like registrations are anywhere from say 500 to maybe 1,500 for a 2 to 3 day event. That's fairly standard, and then you would have an early bird rate. So when I was with Power Housing, we would generally charge about 800, 850 for an early bird, and then so they had that available for about 3 to 4 months, and then about probably 2 months prior to the event, the early bird would cancel, and then it would go up to say 1,200. So you provide quite a good incentive to get them to register a lot earlier. And what is your break-even point? So you really need to know what it is financially that you need to achieve. Where will the event be held? So if you're running an annual conference for a company, obviously you don't want to go, well, it was a bit different for us in Queensland with Health Workforce because it was all Queensland based, but we had a structure where we would move it around from southeast Queensland up to North Queensland. But with Power Housing, because it was an Australian-based company, we would move it around. So you determine the best destination and location based on your previous events. So if you were in Melbourne one year, you don't want to go back to Melbourne the next year, because the Melbourne delegates, they want to go somewhere different. They want to experience something new. So yeah, you have to mix it up. You submit a request for proposals. So once you've confirmed the destination or the city or the location, then you submit your request for proposals. So I haven't given you a copy of those because I think a lot of you have seen them, but if not, you will get to that in your studies. So basically it's a form that you provide to the venues, and it will tell them the dates of your event, how long it's going for, how many people you're expecting to attend, what the content will be, like how many rooms do you want to hire? Do you want just one main large plenary room? Do you want 2 or 3 other smaller breakout rooms? Do you need area for sponsors and trade? Are you having a gala dinner? What about a welcome reception? So every bit of information that you know goes onto your request for proposal. And then the venues will respond to you and provide you with a quotation based on have they got the capacities that you need, have they got availability, and once you get your proposals back, then you go through them with a fine-tooth comb, you look at all the fine print and double check all the terms and conditions, and you weigh up, well, which is the best one for you. Generally speaking, you may get to do venue inspections or site inspections. I was really fortunate in my role that they would pay me to go and come up and inspect sites. So I sort of already had a feel of which venues would really suit our target audience and which had the space and the capacities. So then I would only submit a request for a proposal to the venues that I was really sort of keen on. But you'd have your favourite, and more often than not that was the most expensive, but you know, you can negotiate down, and you can sometimes, well, I was lucky to get the venues that we wanted, which was good. So you do your negotiations, choose your final venue, you pay a deposit, and it's locked in. So that was an image that we had on our website to entice people to come to Sydney for our first event. Our first event that I managed was at the Menzies Hotel. It's a really beautiful old hotel. It was in a fantastic location. It's had a lot of add-ons, and the downsize, I didn't actually choose that venue. I came on board to coordinate the event, but they already had everything sort of in place for that one prior to me starting there. But the downsize with that particular hotel, we had a gala dinner there, and it had pillars everywhere, and we had most of our plenary meetings and everything in this particular room where there was large pillars. So we learned from that we didn't want to have a plenary with pillars in it for our next event. So you sort of learn as you go. Another downfall with that one was that we had to have quite a number of breakout rooms, and some of our breakout rooms were in the main part of the building, but other breakout rooms were in a sort of an attached accommodation part of the hotel, if you like. But and the rooms we wanted were way, way, way down in what we called Siberia, and you had to go downstairs, up another flight of stairs, walk a million miles. So for us as conference managers, we would just literally run off our feet because you're like backwards and forwards, and it was a long distance. So you learn from that, no, we just want everything all on the same floor, we want everything close to each other so that we can manage it quite comfortably and easily. Oh, what happened there? Oh, there we go. Our second conference that I was involved in, we held at the Grand Hyatt in Melbourne, and that was a really fantastic venue for the purposes of what we wanted it for. It had a really beautiful outdoor courtyard that we held a welcome reception in. It had a beautiful ballroom that we held our gala dinner and awards in, and all our breakout rooms were all together. It was really convenient and easy, and we had a big space for trade exhibitors. We only had about 15 trade exhibits, so it wasn't huge, but it was a good space for what we knew we needed. And then the last event I did for Powerhousing, we did at Sheraton on the Park, and that was just absolutely stunning and a beautiful venue. And again, it worked exceptionally well for all our needs. Your program and run sheet. Initial planning, begin your schedule of events. So you're all familiar with Gantt charts, I'm sure. So you have to start having your time frame of when does this need to be done by, what needs to be done. So every little task that you have to do, book a speaker, contact this person or contact that supplier, everything has to be on your schedule of events and your timeline. And that includes initial stages of the actual program for the event. That might take a little bit of working through, and you may not be involved in the actual structure of the program at the conference, but depending who you work for. Meetings. How do you want the structure? Like, how many meetings do you want? How many plenaries are you going to have? So your plenary is where all the delegates come at the start of the conference. You're usually there from around 8:30 or 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. until morning tea. Then you all go out and have your morning tea. You go off to separate breakout rooms to hear various speakers. So you might be able to choose which speaker you want to go and hear. Then at lunch you come back for your catering. Mid-afternoon, you're in your breakout rooms again, and usually from afternoon tea till the close of that day, you come back into your main plenary room so that everybody can all be in one space. You need to know what your social functions will be. Do you want them on the same site as the conference, or do you want some of them to be off-site? And what will your catering options be? Again, you would have put most of this on your request for a proposal anyway, but as I say, I'm sort of going through it just so I'm highlighting what needs to be addressed. So you'll have your day delegate packages for all the delegates attending during the day. If you're having a welcome reception, that's usually drinks and canapes. Breakfasts might be included. You might have like networking breakfasts, those types of things. And usually a gala dinner to finish and wrap up at the end of the conference. Accommodation, it's really good to have a venue where they can cater for the majority of the accommodation on site. Now, not all your delegates would choose to stay there because some of them might have family friends or other people they can stay with. They might want cheaper options, like a few of them bunking into apartment style accommodation.